That's where I send people to when I play my guitar.
All right, we're here. Thank you, John. Stressful. Once we're done with this call, it's just going crazy on packing. Yeah. All right. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the very last call. So to reiterate what we've gone over in the past calls, the first one we went over just branding in general, right? What you should talk about, how to leverage your personality, and like you are the niche. The second one we went over short form content, so how to write short form content as a base for everything you do. Highly recommended. The third call was networking and growth, so different strategies for getting eyes on your content and just meeting new people, making new friends, all of that good stuff. And in this call, we are going to talk about medium form content, which may sound weird because there's usually only short and long form. So we'll make that distinction now when I pull up this slide. So medium form content for repurposing, structure, and authority. This is for those that want to build more authority and gain more followers with medium form content. For those that want to understand the anatomy of a good hook that can be transferred over into any style of content. So the main thing we're looking for here is to be able to write a compelling and attention-grabbing hook, because once you can do that, and once you do that successfully on one platform, so let's say Twitter, you write a good hook and you know that one's going to perform, then you kind of just know that your content is going to perform well on other platforms that you take that and transfer it over to, right? That's how I repurpose everything. It's usually around validated ideas. But of course, don't forget that you have to try to get eyes on that content, right? It's not really as simple as you write a good hook and then it does well on Twitter because you're getting a lot of traffic there, but then you post it on Instagram with no effort going towards getting eyes on that content, then clearly it's not going to have eyes that would spread that to more people. And you may get lucky with the algorithm, but I'm all about just being self-reliant, doing it in an evergreen way, so you don't have to base everything you do and stay up to date with all the algorithm changes. Next is for those that want to repurpose their best short form content to increase your chances at virality, auto-corrected to vitality, I guess both work, with other platforms and mediums. And the last thing is for those that want to leverage everything we've talked about to grow faster. So first, we're going to go over the theory. As always, with these slides, we're going to understand the importance and components of medium form writing and learn how to leverage your best content. Next, we'll go over examples of my own threads and a few other threads and how I've repurposed, pretty much copy and pasted to other platforms, and how I structure those. And then third is practice. So we'll go through the last section of the Notion template that we haven't been through yet, in order to bring everything we talk about in these slides into one cohesive template that you can use to practice writing medium form. And then last, Q&A. This is going to be quite a long call. So if you have questions along the way, preferably in alignment with what we're talking about today, pop them in the Q&A section of the chat. There's a distinction between regular chat and the Q&A section. So first, I guess this goes over it. So medium form content is what we're talking about here. So for platforms and application, LinkedIn posts are like the perfect example of medium form content. So what I mean by that is like a full length LinkedIn post, which has a character limit of like 4,000 characters. Okay. So one thing with LinkedIn, a lot of you learn this through experience, is that you have to understand where it cuts off your hook in the actual post itself, because before it says like read more, and this is becoming more of a thing with the 4,000 character tweets. So just be mindful that you need to capture attention. You need to include the entirety of your hook and craft the entirety of your hook so that it is shown above the fold. Above the fold is just like a marketing term for what they can see when either they scroll by it, or like on a website, it's the first thing you see, like the headline that's above the fold. Next example would be Twitter threads. Clearly, they're great for growth, followers, and virality. 10 tweets is the sweet spot that I've found, simply for the sake of being able to repurpose them to other platforms, right? 10 tweets in a Twitter thread is like the perfect length for a long LinkedIn post. It doesn't get cut off. It's the perfect length for a 5 to 10 minute YouTube video if you use it as a script. And it's the perfect length for like Instagram carousels because they only allow for 10 slides. So next up is YouTube videos. So my first video that hit 1 million views was from a Twitter thread that we went over previously. I'll show those in the examples, but I just used the thread as a script, pulled it up on my phone, literally read it word for word to the camera, and simple as that. But next, it can be for Instagram carousels or captions, right? So keep this in mind when you're writing captions, because it's similar to a LinkedIn post where you have to not only hook their attention in the post itself and get them to go through the carousel or just read the post, but if you want them to read the caption and you plan on promoting something, whether it be a product, service, newsletter at the end of the caption, or just telling people to go to the link in your bio, then you have to be mindful of capturing attention with what they can see of the caption, and then have them click learn more, and then hold their attention down to the call to action. And of course, you can just repurpose your thread and post it on Instagram, because 10 tweets equals 10 slides. And another thing about the limiting Twitter threads to 10 tweets is that it forces you to condense your ideas. It forces you to get very clear on what you're going to write about in that. And then another thing, so I write long newsletters. My content system is a bit more drawn out, and I wouldn't recommend that people try to emulate it just yet. But if you're going to start writing newsletters, what we talk about today will be pretty dang good to start writing newsletters. So you could do like 2 a week, not newsletters, but 2 medium form pieces of content a week, where one's a newsletter, one's a thread. The next week, the newsletter gets repurposed into a thread, and then so on and so forth. So medium form content is better for leading into promotions, more sales, and leads. So it's smart to incorporate medium form content when you can. We'll go over the nuances to that in a tad bit. So if you look on the right here, where it's the structure of a medium form post is pretty much a hook. So you have to capture attention and open a curiosity loop so they click. We'll dive deeper into this, but then the next thing is value. So you can include things like novel perspectives, actionable advice, or just lessons. The last thing, and that's to hold attention, right? You have to solve the problem that you implied in the hook, or you have to close the curiosity loop that you opened in the hook. After that is the conclusion, where you just wrap it up and give a call to action. And that's also where you can convert. And hopefully you don't even have to promote if you don't want to, but conversion here could also mean followers. So after it, you delivered enough value per se for them to click on your profile and follow you. So next thing is we don't want to start with the hook. We want to start with a topic, which is separate from the hook, and flesh out the value within it. So the best content you can write from the start. These are threads that I would recommend. When I say threads, I mean medium form writing, but I'm just going to say threads, right? So the first threads that I would recommend that you write is one on your story. So where you were before, where you are now, and what the transformation was in between. And that is usually focused on one lesson, like what changed, what was the big thing that changed in your life. The next things you should practice writing are just turning the list tweets that we wrote in the short form content call into threads, right? Because a lot of the examples that we went over were list tweets. So it had a hook as a line, then it had a few bullet points, and then it wrapped it up. So all you need to do is turn that hook into the first tweet, write a bit about each bullet point that you had in their own individual tweets in there, or just as points in like a newsletter or something, and then wrap it up with a conclusion and a call to action. So a thread in this case would just be an expanded list tweet that you've already written, and bonus points if you have been trying to get traffic to your content previously, and you know that a certain post of yours has done better than others, meaning you want to turn that high-performing post into as many content pieces as you possibly can. So whether it be a thread, newsletter, YouTube video, if you plan on branching into those platforms, or when you plan on branching into those platforms. It's also okay if you just stack up like good ideas and focus on one platform like Twitter, and then you write threads, tweets, and eventually have a database or a bank of high-performing ideas that you can then take and post on other platforms. And when you do that, and you focus more of your efforts on growing on those platforms, because let's say Twitter at this point is kind of automatic, you've built enough momentum to keep it running, and you can focus efforts on other platforms, but you're doing it from a place of much, much higher leverage when you're posting your best ideas, because you know those are going to result in the most engagement and followers. The next one you can write is just like a foundational introduction to your main interest to establish authority. So the main interest is usually revolves around the one that you offer a product or service in. And so what you're doing here is you're just proving that you're an authority on that subject. So if you have a product or service, or you plan on creating one, then go over the main points of that product or service from a beginner level and start to introduce people to that topic, right? And we've also already done this previously with the short form content that we wrote, where it could be like 10 reasons to start an e-commerce store. And then you would have your bullet points there, and then you can flesh those out in a thread and start to build more authority because you're giving more value. The last one is just examples. Like you can write listicles, stories, actionable steps, or lessons, like one main lesson in a thread, and we'll go over examples of these. Any topic can be structured as a list, and people love the organization of lists. It keeps people engaged regardless of if you promote it as a list. Like not all of your threads have to be 13 reasons why, like 13 reasons why I changed my life or something like that. The hook doesn't have to have the reasons. I'm just saying that you can usually flesh out and structure the content of a thread in like a list format, or in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 format to help keep people engaged. And then you, like, throughout it, we'll go over this, but you want to use personal experiences, curated content, and your knowledge to create the value, right? To flesh out the bullet points. Now, one absolutely incredible writing framework in general, and this can be applied to sales pages, newsletters, landing pages, opt-in pages, threads, captions, anything is Pastor, right? So a condensed version of Pastor is just PAS, and what that stands for is problem, amplify, solution. So PAS can work really well for a tweet where you hit a problem, you amplify it, and you wrap it up and you give the solution, right? So with Pastor, let's say we're writing a thread, right? So after the hook, this is after the hook, you illustrate a relevant problem based on the topic you're talking about. So you kind of frame what you're talking about with a problem. And so that helps develop the perspective of what's going on. And then after that, you amplify it by painting a picture of how that problem either impacted their past or how it's impacting their present and how it will impact their future. It's not all of the above. It's just like you're amplifying the problem however you can. And then story is you're implying that you, someone, or a client solved this problem and what the major change was. So this is like the inflection point in a story. And then testimony, so social proof, if you have it, this is optional for content, but it helps like give you credibility. This is mostly pertains to like sales pages, right? So problem, amplify, story, testimony is kind of like whatever. And then offer, in this case, is the solution. So you're breaking down the key points into actionable points. And then after that, response is a call to action. And so what you're doing with a response or a call to action is you're reminding them of the problem or like what's going to happen if that problem remains in their life. And then you encourage them, I gave you the solution, get after it, wrap up the rest of the thread. And then after that, you can promote whatever you want at the bottom of a thread. So the anatomy of a hook. This stuff can get, like you can go as crazy as you want with studying marketing, copywriting, whatever it is. You could study endlessly. You could study years about all of this. So we're going to go over this, but if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. You don't have to go too crazy about this. And when we get into actually writing the content, you'll learn with practice, right? It's just good to become aware of these things so that as you are actually creating and writing, you can note the connection like, oh, okay, that's where that goes. That's where that goes. So in terms of writing firepower for your hook, the things that can be included in a hook are a big idea, a common goal, or like a desirable goal that someone wants to hit, problems relating to that goal, benefits of overcoming the problems, objections that people have. So let's imagine like I start my hook with quotes and it's like, what's like a common objection? You can't work for 4 hours every day. Like that's impossible. And then that catches people's attention and it's an objection. And then I walk in like, here's exactly how I work 4 hours a day, lead into the thread. And so after that, research. So anecdotes, statistics, or quotes. And if you remember from the second call where we talk about like how, like the 10 commandments of capturing engagement, statistics, quotes, other things like that, they help. Statistics specifically. The next thing is personal experiences. And these, it can come into play like wherever in your thread, but if it were in a hook, it'd be like, I studied marketing for 1,000 hours. Here's the 10 lessons that I learned, right? So that's kind of a personal experience baked into the hook. Metaphors and concepts. So concept is kind of like a big idea, but an example of a concept would be the one-person business model. So if you can get creative, I don't know if this is like reserved. Like if you study the 9 stages of ego development or whatever it is, there's like stage 8, which is concept aware or construct aware. And I just know that like being able to take your ideas and turn them into your own concept may take a bit more experience. But an example of including that in a title, headline, or hook would be my YouTube video that did well on the one-person business model, how to productize yourself. Systems and processes. So this is another thing where an example in the hook would be like my 3-step fill empty use system for maximum productivity. So that's another example of a system or process with a concept baked in as well. So what you're trying to do is you're not necessarily trying to plan all of these out at the start. You can, but what you're trying to do is after you write your thread, then you kind of dig into it and you figure out, okay, what are some problems that I hit? What are goals that people are trying to achieve? What's the big idea of this thread? What are some objections to what I'm saying? What are some of my personal experiences? Joey, I can hear you laughing. Please mute yourself. And then metaphors. Well, sorry, distracted. So that's what you do. When you write the actual value inside the thread, then you go through and you figure out, okay, which one of these under the writing firepower is the most compelling and would make the most sense to include in the hook to open the curiosity loop that would then lead into the thread, right? And so that says it right here. Identify these after you are finished writing, choose the most compelling ones and combine them into a hook. And so now other things that you need to take into account when you're actually crafting the hook is relevance and reach. So is the hook broad enough to be retweeted by the average individual, or is it too niche? And this is where the balance of, like, if you don't have many followers and you don't have a way of getting too many eyes on your content, then going super niche and trying to like write a thread for a super specific audience when you have no chance of getting in front of them, that's just a waste of space, right? You have to start broad and beginner level with this stuff so that it can actually get shared. And then as your audience grows, then you can incorporate more of the specific stuff to help the people that are in the audience itself. So just be sure that your hook would be desirable and comprehensible by the average person. And so the next thing is the hook relevant to their lives? Will it register as something useful to them? Like, will it make sense? Or are you being specific as to how it impacts my life or how it can impact my life? Another thing is to imply at either a pain, benefit, or both. So pains and benefits, that's the driver of human behavior. That's what's going to get people to click. So if you can either directly state a problem, pain, or benefit, or imply one, then you're on the right track. And so we're either painful or beneficial enough to click. And the last thing is perceived effort. So people are on top of funnel social media to scroll and be entertained. They're not really there. Like, you aren't scrolling on YouTube. Some of you are, most people aren't scrolling on YouTube or Twitter or Instagram to find, like, they aren't specifically searching for, like, how do I start a business? Some people are, of course, but they're not searching for like a specific tactic within that. They're kind of just scrolling whatever pops up on their feed. They're going to watch whatever catches their attention. They're going to watch. So if you can catch their attention and deliver something that is both beginner level, interesting, entertaining, and educates them, you're hitting like a holy trifecta of things. And so my face may be blocking this, but does your hook position the benefit as easy to acquire, right? So be careful here. We'll go over like what we actually mean by this. We're not saying like promise, like huge, don't make huge promises and make it seem like they're going to get them very quick. I'll bring this back up when we go over examples. So a priority reminder, what your priority should be. Medium form content is an incredible thing, but remember where you are in your journey. So if you're a beginner and if you don't have a strategy for getting eyes on your content, like we talked about in the last call, so networking, mastermind, or paid traffic, then focus on generating traffic. Like you can, we'll discuss this. So as an intermediate, it's the same story, but you can start to make medium form content a habit. It's going to become a thing. It might as well become a thing even if you're not getting maximum eyes on it and you're not going viral every single time you write one. Advanced, systemize your content and promote under each medium form piece. So when you're advanced, let's say 5 to 10K followers. I would argue that you're pretty advanced. You understand like, okay, I'm in direct control of my growth. This is something that I'm going to do for quite a long time. It makes sense to systemize and create a schedule for what you're writing. So on Twitter, as an example, if you were to write 2 threads a week and promote your products or services, then if those are flowing very well and that's how you promote, then the rest of your content is just like testing and having fun and talking about whatever you want, because you have the main authority building system in place with 2 threads a week going out that will result in the most sales anyways, because they're medium form content. You're just not going to make as much with short form content unless you have like the perfect one. And so the main lesson is we don't want to write a bunch and have it go unseen. So if you have time, then you should practice anyways. I know many people are trying to fit this into either like an hour in the morning or a few hours after work, and feeling like you have to write threads like it's an absolute necessity. It's just not a thing. Like, I don't think, like, I personally wrote maybe 3 threads my first year just because I felt like it. And then I've systemized them here and there. I've wrote consistently for like months at a time. I'm not writing any right now. It's just dependent on like, do you have the time? Do you not have the time? Does it make sense? Just think through it. And so the more you write, the better you get. Just remember your priorities if you're a crunch for time. So I would personally prioritize short form content, getting eyes on your content, and building leverage. So that is it for the slides. And now I want to transition to some examples so we can understand this more. Okay. So I mentioned one of the first pieces you could write is a story thread. So a story thread based around a lesson, right? Or multiple lessons. So this is from Sam Williams. This is a great example. And I don't want to make this seem like it was my doing, because it definitely wasn't, but I retweeted this one. I know that for a fact. And so that may have been the case that it got to this point. So it just goes to show that, like, if you are networking well and you write this and you send it to your network, and let's say you get 3 larger accounts to engage, then you have a pretty big chance at it doing well if you get it right. So at 21, ruled by fear, a slave to my desires, seeing 3 a.m. more than 6 a.m., more bad habits than Ed Sheeran. At 27, exercising daily, waking up at 5:30, using fear as a compass, running ultramarathons. Here are 19 rules that changed my life. So not only does he imply and directly state pain points here, right? Pains and benefits. He implies a story. So he opens a curiosity loop because people are wondering, okay, what happened between these things? Like what's bridging the gap there? He threw in some humor. And he potentially hit some desirable goals that people want, right? Goals. And then he used numbers throughout it to hold attention. And then here are 19 rules that changed my life. So it's a listicle, right? With a benefit. So he's hitting a lot of different things here. And the best thing you can do with threads is, like, if you were to just go through the slides that we just went through, that's not really going to help you write a good thread. I'm going to be quite honest. You're going to have a lot better time looking through the accounts you aspire to be like and just immersing yourself in medium form content. Rather than watching a YouTube video, observe a YouTube video. Like, dissect it, research, understand, like, what kind of structure are they using that led to it getting this many views? What kind of title, like, why is the title so compelling? What parts from the slides that we just went through are being included here? And, like, how did they come up with that, right? So we look at this. It did well. We dive deeper. And the thing here is that with threads, you can just go straight into the lessons, right? We'll go over an example of where I talked about the problem and agitated the problem, which can be done in just like one tweet, a few sentences. But the bulk of your thread content or just medium form content in general should be the value that you're providing, right? So it can be hook, quick problem, but even the problem is implied here. So it's baked in, and then straight into the value. And the value is going to take up the most of the thread itself. So it's just a list, like tweets within themselves. And you can study this to understand what's going on here. Because another thing is with threads, like we can't really give you exactly how to write the tweets within the threads. That's mostly up to you. And it's mostly up to including like your personal experiences, anecdotes you've heard, the knowledge that you have, maybe research. So if you write a thread about lessons and then your sixth lesson is take 100% responsibility, but you can't think of anything for this, then open up ChatGPT, open up Medium, open up Google, and just look at how to take responsibility, right? Research it. Read an article. Don't copy and paste, but read the article and then come back. And now you're like, you've brought it top of mind and you can speak hopefully from experience on those things, especially if you're writing a story thread. So that's one example. The next is that this is an example that I wrote in 2021, but I want to flash me. That works. Cool. So 4 hours of, like, one of my top tweets at that time was, it was something along the lines of like 6 months of focus. Either way, this used to be a tweet, right? It was a tweet about like how 4 hours of focus work a day for 6 months will change your life. And so I literally just copy pasted it to the thread hook, said, here's how, thread, and it did pretty dang well. And so here, yeah, these were all over the place. Like, so this goes to show that you don't have to like go straight into the, like what everyone else is doing, where it's like 1, 2, 3, just condensing everything to one tweet. I wrote mine kind of like a blog at this point where I had the lead. So I'm illustrating the problem here. And then I'm agitating or amplifying the problem. So if you remember the Pastor framework, it's problem, amplify. So you can read through this, but mainstream news outlets monetize your attention through fear. I'm making it very relevant. I'm making it make sense to them as to why this is important. And so I still talk about the problem here, still talk about it, and then I get into the actionable steps, right? So this is how I organize them, where this is kind of the subject. And I just went into it. Subject. Shout out Cypreneur.
Rest in peace.
Well, the tweet was right here that I turned into the hook. But you get the point, right? So there's hook, problem, amplify, and then the solution is broken down into key points, which we'll talk about in structure in the Notion template. But to go over the hook, we're wasting time. We'll go over the next one. So this is just an example of how I repurposed it again. I ended up, this was December, so a year and a half later, I turned it into a newsletter, and then I condensed that newsletter into a thread. So I used pretty much the exact same hook, added in my 10 commandments of the 4-hour workday. So I have a concept here. I have the big idea up here. I have numbers. I'm implying a potential problem. People know that they're doing distracted work. And yes, and then I have a graphic. I didn't have to include that, but I did. And then just went straight into it. So another one is just plain and simple. And I want to show you how I repurpose these two. So plain and simple, how to do a hard reset on your life in 30 minutes. And I was writing this with YouTube in mind because that's why this hook is a lot shorter, right? I wanted to be able to test and see whether it would do good on YouTube, just by keeping it to like a YouTube title, right? And so what I did here is when I had the idea or the topic that I wanted to talk about, then I can go look at YouTube videos, see how the titles are structured, or see how my best titles were structured, and then create the hook around that. And so then again, illustrate the problem. And this one's shorter, you can see, and go straight into the points. So notice how I mentioned how everything can be turned into a list. This doesn't hint at a list. It just hints at like step 1, step 2, step 3, so on and so forth. And this is what I kept to, I kept this to 10 tweets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Boom. And we'll see why soon. But the next one is how to get ahead of 99% of people in 6 to 12 months. So I was doing this one for a YouTube video as well. And this video has over 1 million views now. So it just goes to show that writing a 10-tweet thread does not go to waste no matter when or how you write it, because you can come back and repurpose it whenever you want. If you stick this game out, you're not just going to come back and repurpose it a month later. Maybe 6 to 12 months later, you can come back and repurpose your best content. So same thing. But on this one, I tested just going straight into it, not mentioning the problem, even though this illustrates a problem, right? It's just something that you hit on. So best thing you can do is go through and study good threads and try to emulate their structure, not the idea, or at least not the articulation of the idea. So it's the same thing with short form content, where you're trying to find good structures for your writing so that you can articulate your own ideas. You're not taking the idea itself, just the structure. So here you can see how this just went straight to Instagram. Same exact thread. Easy peasy. If you want a way to do this, I do it in Figma, but you can do it with TweetPic, where you just go to TweetPic, screenshot tweets, copy paste the link, and then it shows here. And if you purchase TweetPic, you can like take this off and then change all the colors and stuff to make it however you'd like. I personally like doing it in Figma just because I want minor differences from everyone else. That's like how I try to stand out. And so if everyone's using TweetPic, then it's like I want to go and create my own custom one so I can at least change the font and make it a tiny bit different. You can do it in Canva as well. You just have to understand the software enough to create the actual thing. So this one's an example of like my story thread. This one was in 2021. I was probably around like 40,000 followers around there, if I guess correctly. But this wasn't the best hook. So it just goes to show like you don't need perfection with this stuff. It's better to just start writing, because my hooks only started popping off like 3 years into this. But that doesn't mean that your threads don't have like a relevant or a relative chance at doing very well for your follower count, right? A lot of threads, like when you aim for virality or going viral, you're rarely going to hit it, right? So it's better to just like drop all expectations, do what you can in order to write the best hook, and then just launch it and get better and practice and get better. But of course, it's good to do it from a place of being educated on what makes a good hook. So the next one, just showing like on LinkedIn, I did the same thing with this. So you could either do it as the carousel, or if you do it in 10 tweets, you should be able to just go straight into the post itself. Yeah, so how to do a hard reset on your life in 30 minutes. And then I just went straight, I literally just copy pasted it from Twitter. And it fits perfectly. if it's 10 tweets long. And then YouTube, like if you want to see the YouTube version, just go type in or go look at my most popular videos. This is the most popular video on there. And you can see how I structured that. There was barely any B-roll. It was literally just me talking to the camera. Yes. Okay, so we got those. So now going over to the Notion template itself, we're going to be focused on this one for repurposing content. So the first thing we're going to need in this is a topic or an idea in itself. So the best thing you can do is either pick something from here or pick a tweet that you've already written, right? So if we take something like this on intermittent fasting, we can use this as a hook, but of course we want to spice it up a bit, but we can take these and use them as the key points. And yeah, you just want to pick an idea that you think will do well, because you'll never know with absolute certainty. You just have to guess in a better direction for years. So this is the template. And when you come in here, you can just create a new template like this if you want to go and write another thread. So you click that, boom, there it is. And you can see like a little structure here if you want to actually follow this. You could send it as a newsletter, post as a thread the next week, post as a blog the next week. is just what I was saying for Modern Mastery. Medium and LinkedIn, use it as a future book chapter or product module, use as a script for a podcast episode. It's pretty much telling you that you should make a habit of writing, because it doesn't go to waste. Even if Twitter like only shows your tweets for a day, or the lifespan of a tweet is only a day, that's still written content that you can build on top of and use in other places. Like I've been on podcasts and even in my YouTube videos, like when I bring up a topic, sometimes I'll just say one of my tweets that I have on my mind, because that's the best way of me articulating the idea, right? So the more you write and the more you kind of solidify how you view these ideas, the more you can articulate them in content down the road. So the first thing we do when actually planning this out, you can see that we don't create the hook yet, right? We just start with a topic. So what topic are you talking about? And have you researched 2 to 3 blog posts, YouTube videos, or books that contain the same topic, or even just like threads, right? And what I mean by researching blog posts, YouTube videos, or books, this is usually to generate ideas for what's going to go inside the thread. So the next thing is research. So when you can either answer these from personal experience, or if you don't have an answer, you can research other articles or books. And just also know that all of these are optional. Like it would help, you can see how long this is. It would help to actually go through this entire process your first few times writing threads, just so you get the hang of it. Remember, like training wheels before it becomes effortless. It's like you need help learning to walk until that skill becomes effortless for you. And same thing with any other skill. It's just like walking. But we don't register how difficult it was to walk because it's so normal to us now. So you can read through these and you can see how it's like pulling creative firepower that you'll be able to actually use in the thread itself. So when you're writing the thread, or you're writing out the key points down here, key points, transformation, then you can use all of this and like piece it together into a very persuasive and non-generic thread. Now, the main problem. So what's the main problem of the topic and the research? Again, this can be based on personal experience or research above. In a lot of my newsletters right now, I'd like to illustrate the problem just from personal experience, where if I'm talking about building a business, then I talk about all my business failures. If I'm talking about like productivity, then I talk about when I was overworked and stressed out and other things like that, because that's a lot more relatable. If I can just speak from experience the entire time, then a lot more people can relate to that, and it kind of writes itself in a relevant and relatable manner, because you know that someone has gone through that and that person is you. So the next thing is to just list out 3 to 10 key points. It can be more, it can be less, whatever fulfills on the topic that you're writing about. And so then you write down the key point, key point, key point. And it's good to bring the transformation into mind where like the benefits of solving the problem. So where are they now? Where do they want to go? So this is like the pain benefit dynamic or the goal problem dynamic. What problems are they facing? Where are they at in life right now? And where do they want to be? That's all marketing and content revolves around, is literally just like reframing what a transformation is in many different ways. That's all marketing, sales, writing, content, human behavior is all about. So a headline. So you can do 2 things here, right? A hook and a headline. A headline is for things like an article or a single line Twitter thread like this one. I would consider this a headline, and I would consider something like this a hook. That's my distinction. That's not like everyone's distinction. So think of headline as one line, think of hook as multi-line. And with the headline, it says right here, your headline should sum up the transformation, problem, or main benefit discussed in your post. Numbers will work well. Just reiteration of what we've already talked about in terms of catching attention. And it helps when you're writing a headline to go and look at blog posts, YouTube videos, whatever. So go to Medium. And you can kind of just pick and choose a structure after you write something. So let's say just what's top of my mind. I don't know what I'm trying to find. Oh, this. Okay, so let's say the topic is online business, and a big problem that people face is not knowing how to write content. And so 3 points, according to that, would be, or key points would be, learn how to craft a hook. And I could write down like a bunch of advice on capturing attention from my 10 commandments. And then point 2 would be how to deliver value. So how to structure things out and write the key points. Point 3 could be how to get eyes on that content. So a quick hitter of like a quick tip of you should try to send this to people in your network or just tag people in the thread. And then, so from that, if we're talking about online business and not having enough content ideas, and we have, let's say, 5 key points for actually overcoming that problem. So it's cool. So this could be like 4 content tips that'll help you capture attention and get more readers, right? So it's not the most powerful hook or headline, but it does work. And you can go and search through better like YouTube videos, or just continue immersing yourself in headlines and hooks until it becomes natural. Right here. Okay. So for a hook, think of your hook as a short 2 to 3 sentence introduction. This should be relatable. An introduction to what most people are going to do in relation to the main problem. This can be simple. I'm struggling reading. This can be as simple as describing lifestyle choices or challenging common beliefs. The first sentence should encourage them to read more. What will grab their attention? Example, tell me if this sounds familiar, hints at a relatability, and encourages them to read on. So the way I like to think of like hook and headline is they kind of go hand in hand. Like a headline can be mentioned at the top. Hook can be right after the headline in the same tweet leading into everything. But in this case of like a newsletter, the headline is the subject line and the hook is once they click something that like captures their attention and moves them downward. But on something like a Twitter thread, these are kind of interchangeable. And then the lead is where you describe and amplify the problem. So a lead in content writing is what comes after the hook or headline. So you're leading people into the actual post by illustrating and describing the problem that you are trying to solve. So you can write it here. And of course, you can refer back to the Pastor framework. I'm actually going to link a better, I'll link this in the dashboard once we get to it. But this really helps with understanding the Pastor framework and gives examples. So you could read through this, study it, and try to practice with it. Another thing that I will mention about medium form content, like all of this, it's really difficult at the start. Like if you're brand new, you're going to be staring at a screen for like 2 hours. It's just how it goes. I did it. Everyone else did it. You feel like you have no idea what you're doing. It gets easier with time, I promise. Like even writing your first sales page, man, that is a task and a half. If I'm assuming that people are like me, it took me like 2 weeks to write my first sales page, and now it's just top of mind. Like I can bust them out in a day. And so going on, you have the headline, hook, lead. You can talk about a story, or at least write out a story to further lead into your key points. But it really depends on how you want to actually structure the thread, because there's so many different ways of doing it. So if you're doing an email or newsletter, then it makes sense to have the headline as the subject line, a hook, lead them in, talk about a story, and then get into the key points, right? Because it can be a tad bit longer. Same with a YouTube video. It also works for a thread. But if you want to just go straight from hook to key points in a thread, that can work too. So as always, like you're going to be writing a lot of these. So test them all, see which one flow better for you, which you can write the best with, and all of that fun stuff. And so after the story is just key points. So now this is where it starts to get really helpful with actually fleshing out the content inside the thread. So you wrote your key points up here. And so let's imagine that we're writing about writing and you want to learn to capture attention, hold attention, get eyes on. Okay. So for key point 1, who does this, you can run through these questions to be able to generate ideas for fleshing these out, right, inside your thread. So who does this point help? So I could say, if nobody reads your content, or if you don't get any engagement, it's because nobody likes your content. And so what does it help them solve? So capturing attention, you could hit on a problem there where it's like, if you don't capture attention, they're not going to see the value you have to provide in your post itself. And so they aren't going to read, they aren't going to reach your promotions, and you're not going to make any sales. And so that could literally be that part of the thread, right? So if I were to mention it like right here, capture attention, then I could say exactly what I said in a few sentences of how if you don't know how to capture attention, they're not going to read what's inside your content. They're not going to reach the bottom. They're not going to reach your promotions. You're not going to make enough to actually sustain an income as a writer. And then after that, I could go into a solution or tips relating to it. But there's more here. So where can they find more info, or who did you learn this from? When can they expect results? Why should they listen to this advice? How do they implement this advice? So it's pretty much like you give advice, and this helps frame the advice that you're giving. And so you're arguing the first point, and you do that for the second, third, however many, right? And so as I said, like this is drawn out and structured in a potentially complicated way for those that are just starting out for a reason, because you need to understand the components. You want to understand the depth that goes into writing this stuff, so that even if you come in and you struggled to write your first one, it's still going to be better than someone who comes in with no education on thread writing and just tries to pump one out. Okay. But as always, the main thing to keep in mind here is like emulation. is always the best thing. Like if you see a thread or a YouTube video or a Medium article that like you like the structure of it, then you can just practice writing your own. Okay, so one last thing. I just did want to mention that, of course, you guys know this is the last call. I'm going to be sending out an email later with instructions, but good or bad, whatever feedback you want to leave, I would love the feedback on this first sprint, just so I can iterate and improve. But I'll send this later. Just wanted to bring it top of mind right now. Let me turn this off, bring this up. Joey, since you've been ghostwriting a lot, let's top this off. What's like your best thread writing advice?
So the best thread writing advice is to first start by bulleting the thread out so that you have something of what I call a skeleton. So essentially the way you can think of it is you have your hook, which Dan just described how to write a compelling hook. Then you may have a lead, and the lead is the second tweet. So that can add more context to what you said in the hook, or it can impress upon people how important either fixing the problem is or the benefits of doing what you're about to talk about in your thread. So I'll give an example in just a moment. And then a lot of Twitter threads, especially the ones that I've been writing for the clients, have been listicle style. So basically a list article listicle of like 5 things, 7 things, 10 things, whatever, to solve a problem, give benefits, 10 ways to do something, and so on. And then at the end, you summarize that with you reiterate the hook. You don't say in summary, you reiterate the hook, give a list of the points. And then at the end, you have a call to action. Call to action could be leave a comment, follow me, retweet me, DM me if you want to buy my product or service, whatever. Join my newsletter. So let's say, for example, I'm writing, this is a real world example of a week ago where I wrote a thread about reducing high blood pressure. So with that, you have the hook about X number of Americans have high blood pressure. Here are 7 ways to reduce it. Then in the lead, you talk about the risks and dangers of high blood pressure, hypertension. And then you say again, here are 7 ways to reduce your blood pressure naturally. So then typically each of those tweets are going to be one of the methods. So you'd have number 1, cut excess body fat. Number 2, quit smoking. Number 3, so on and so forth. And then that's going to be your thread. So there are other thread types that you can write that aren't a listicle. Like if you look at Dan's newsletters and stuff like that, like they're not like step 1, step 2, step 3, that kind of thing. You can write threads that are like expanding, going deep on one topic. And we've seen that, or myself and Dakota, my partner, have seen that those types of threads are starting to do better lately, the ones that are going deeper into something. So you can kind of have a balance of those. But the big thing is clarity and typically making it actionable or valuable for people. Those words get thrown around a lot, but making it worth the reader's time. One of the biggest things that I see is people saying like, oh, well, people's attention spans are shot now. Like people have the attention spans of a goldfish and stuff like that. It's not that people have short attention spans necessarily. They don't have the attention to give to bad content. So if you keep that in mind when you're creating your content, and like remember, you're writing to people. So it's like if you write something and then you yourself are like, yeah, I wouldn't read that. I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't engage with it. Then just go back to it and improve it so that it is something that you're like. Because the people that your content will resonate most with are probably going to be people who are somewhat similar to you. So especially with threads, because you're putting so much effort into writing those threads, especially with those, since they're time consuming to write and time consuming to read, put extra effort in them to make sure that people actually do read them. So you're not just wasting your time.
Nice. Yeah. And that's it's good to have structure, like my structure in terms of like that template that we just went over, or like emulating my threads or emulating someone else's threads or even YouTube videos. It's just very important to practice a bunch of different ways. Like if you see a thread pop up and you're like, wow, I really like this structure, then try to write your own version with a different idea and just use it as the structure. And then like eventually you develop your own way of doing it, but you kind of have to test and experiment with different techniques to start. I'm actually talking about this in the next newsletter about like self-experimentation with everything. That's how you develop your own way of doing something. And once you develop your own way of doing it and you systemize it, and so let's say you create your own template, not only will that get you more results than trying to be like everyone else, but it gives you a unique standpoint where if you ever did want to come in and create a product around it, you could. And of course, we're talking about content here, but I'm also talking about self-experimentation with diet, with training, with maybe reading. How do you read faster? How do you take notes? Like literally anything that you do, if you self-experiment with different techniques and it's something helpful for for another person's life, that's kind of how you create a unique standout product or service, is through self-experimentation and just practicing and struggling. So I cannot reiterate that enough. Just write. Like even if it doesn't help, if none of what I said helped today, just go out and write.
Here's something I think would benefit people. So one of the questions that I just answered in the Q&A chat was, it was to me. So they were asking, was what I was saying to focus purely on quality over quantity? And my answer was, especially when you're starting out, quantity helps you develop quality. So for the people that have been watching these calls and are kind of afraid to produce a lot of stuff because they think it's going to be lower quality, what would your advice be to them?
Wait, can you repeat that? Sorry, I got trapped on a question.
So basically somebody was asking, so should I only focus on quality over quantity? And I'm like, well, when you're starting off, quantity, it helps you develop your quality. So what would be your advice to people who may be hesitant to be creating because they don't want to produce bad stuff, but creating stuff is how you create good stuff?
Yeah. There's really no way that's set in stone. Like at the beginning, I would believe that anything is good because one, it's not going to be quality. So aiming for quality is kind of against the point because then you may get trapped in that perfectionist mindset where you never post it because like you don't want to, because your expectation is so high and you're comparing yourself to different types of content rather than just putting out in terms of like putting out quantity. So I would say, yeah, aim for quantity, not quality, because either way, if this is your first time writing threads, quality is impossible. I'll tell you that right now. Like you're not going to want to post that first thread, but you have to just do it anyways. So then you can start the next one from a better position. So in my eyes, quantity over quality, but they kind of meet each other at the same time because it's going to take longer to write threads until you get better with them. And so as you create more quality, you're still able to produce the same amount quantity wise as your quality increases. So I hope that answers it. Do you have another one that wanted to be solved?
There was one good question. What was the aha in the sprint for you? Takeaways for evolution, next offering, etc.
Aha. What was aha for you? I didn't really have many ahas because these were all ahas to me. That's why I'm teaching them.
Yeah, I think this is a culmination of all the main things you've learned over the past few years. So it's all important.
This is a culmination of ahas. But for that, this is the evolution as well. So like I've been doing this a while. This is like the evolution on like testing things for digital economics because I like the shorter cohort style, like where it's 2-week sprints rather than like 3-month master classes, because I've done that many times and I understand the problems associated with that. And I feel like this has been a much more engaging way of going over the content. So it's just continuous iteration. Brad, yes, you'll be able to use the code whenever. Any particular angles on how to use your writing to eventually get customers for future SaaS products? Depends on what the product is and the problem that the product solves, because then you can approach from the lens of the problem that the product solves from a beginner level and just talk about that a lot. Oh, Joe, you got that one. Nice. Okay, let's see. We'll go one more. How to use the Genius Idea Incubator once it's fleshed out. How do you plug and play that info to in thread, post, article? Follow the structure from the content multiplication. Yeah, so the Genius Idea thing is kind of just idea generation for all of it, right? Like I have my own database, and so if I'm writing a topic on writing, then I'm going to dig into my ideas that I have around writing, look at the problems associated with those, include those problems in the lead. I'm going to look at some quotes that I have, try to incorporate those somewhere. I'm going to create steps, maybe use a process. You can use all of those ideas as a topic for the thread, right? Or you can use those ideas as a topic for a tweet and then turn that tweet into a thread later. That's kind of it. Like the ideas inside the database that you have are just plug and play for the thread itself. So if you're writing about writing and you're like 10 reasons to get into writing, then look at all of your writing ideas and you can pull pretty good inspiration from those. All right. So that is it. We are complete here. I'm going to wait. No, that is not what I wanted to do. Apologies. All right. But looking at the chat, okay, everyone's plugging stuff. But that was the last call. The slides are going to be the slides and the recordings are going to be uploaded. One thing that I did want to mention is that somewhere in some email, I said that you would have to download the recordings. That was a mistake on my part. You'll be able to maintain access to this dashboard. So don't worry about having to download stuff. Don't worry about not being able to get into the dashboard. All of that is good. You have everything. You're set. I'm also going to send out an email with the recording, as I always do. I'll reiterate on that. I'll also touch on the testimonial thing. I'll wrap everything up, right? Because it's hard to have top of mind right now. Birdie, I realize I can't have people downloading it because then that would just be able to be uploaded for free anywhere. And I'm sure like you guys don't want, like you guys paid for this. I'm sure you don't want other people being able to have it for free. Piracy is an annoying problem in this space. So yes, Ronnie, recordings are available forever. You'll be good to go. I'll touch on everything in the email after this. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for saying thank you. I'm glad that you guys enjoyed it so far. We say our sad goodbyes. Goodbye, my friends. Devin, say your goodbyes. Joey, say your goodbyes.
Bye.
Goodbye, my friends.
Appreciate y'all being here, asking great questions.
All right. Adios.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day and weekend. Love you all.